Go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Becoming a Culturally Responsive Instructor Part 2, Building Your Competency with Victoria McWane-Creek. We're so lucky to have her back. She was with us in February for Part 1, so she's back again today for Part 2. You will see in the chat that I have sent you an invitation to share with us which organization you're with and what word or phrase comes to mind when you think of what it means to be a culturally responsive instructor. So welcome again. My name is Tiffany Ross. I'm the manager of network learning and development here at MCAEL, and I am joined by my colleague Grace Karambiri, who is our programs manager. So some of you may be familiar with Grace from her time with us in the past, and we're so happy to have her on board now. So through our ongoing work at MCAEL, we continue to be committed to equity and access. And through our professional development, we want to continue to support programs and instructors and developing learner-centered classrooms that are inclusive, respectful, and fair spaces for all of our adult ESOL learners. So this fits right into what we're looking to create through our work in partnership with you here at MCAEL. So if you did not attend part 1, that recording is on the MCAEL YouTube channel. I'll send a link through our email after this. But a little overview of what we talked about. We learned that culturally responsive teaching is a mindset. And it may be uncomfortable at first. Victoria took us through the demonstration of trying to sign our names with our non-dominant hand. That's much like learning is in this space. It might be a little uncomfortable at first, but the more we work on it, the more we develop that skill, the better we'll be at it. We also explored different aspects of our identity and learned that whether intentionally or unintentionally, our cultural identities do influence our teaching and hence the learning of the learners in our classes. And then we also had the opportunity to discuss culturally responsive teaching principles. So I'm really excited for today where we'll dig deeper into what are some of the core competencies around culturally responsive teaching. Today's session will be recorded and it will be available on our MCAEL YouTube within about a week. The presentations that Victoria will be sharing with us today will be made available via email. And with that, I will pass it to Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffany. I am so grateful to be with you all again, and I appreciate the invitation to return. That there is nothing like being welcomed back into a space that is so thoughtful and intentional about making sure that our students are successful, and by doing the work that we must do for ourselves in order to ensure that our learners are successful. And I've just been loving the responses to the introduction prompt. And you all are so right on it, that patience that's required, understanding and adaptive, the awareness and the active listening, interpretation. I love that, right? Having that open mind, being sensitive and balanced. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful insights in the chat. Today, what we are going to do, as Tiffany shared, is we are going to be reviewing the competencies of culturally responsive educators. And we're also going to introduce a few practices that you might choose to deploy in your instruction to begin to cultivate that practice of culturally responsive teaching. So we are going to have a lot of opportunity for you all to engage with one another as well as this content. So I just want to share a little bit about the fact that I have been doing this work for about 5 years now. I've been teaching as an educator in some way, shape, or form for, going on 16 years now. And my background educationally is in instructional design and human performance. And so that is all about helping people close the gaps from where we are to where we want and where we want to be, and identifying what are the strategies that we need to deploy in order to get to that ideal state that we are looking to achieve. So that's a little bit about me. I am hailing to you right now from New Mexico, where I was chasing the sun a little bit. It's just very cold and cloudy in Minnesota. And so I am thrilled at the opportunity to do a little bit of work while I'm on vacation. It keeps my mind sharp. So I'm ready to get into this if you all are. I'm going to share my screen here. And we are going to jump into a quick video because we're going to have a conversation about why you do this work, why you are intentional about showing up and ensuring that your learners have the environment that will allow them to thrive, because that's what this is all about. So we're going to play Michael Jr.'s What's Your Why? You may have seen this before, but if not, I hope that you will enjoy it. And I believe I've shared my sound. So let me know if I did not do that.
So the series is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know? The next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what, the key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We were in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm found, was blind.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
So, my reason and rationale for showing that is to help ground us in a bit of a conversation. What I want to do is I want to put us into some groups where we are going to really talk about why. Why is it that you are a teacher, an educator, a volunteer doing this work? Why is it? What is your purpose in this? Because I think that goes a long way towards helping us identify our journey and how we need to navigate. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm asking Tiffany to put us into some breakouts. I can't remember if I said pairs or threes or two. Good. Okay, I said twos. Lovely. So you'll introduce yourself if you don't know one another. You'll ask, and you'll just respond to one another to the question, really, why are you involved in this work? What's your why? All right. We want to center and ground ourselves in your own whys. And we're going to take a whopping 5 minutes, I think is what I said, to do this. So we'll share time while we're in our breakout rooms. And I just invite you to hopefully meet someone and be able to be receptive to hearing from each other and sharing a little bit about your why. And then we'll come back and continue our conversation in the larger room. Questions?
All right, so I created the breakout rooms and I will open them now. Please join your rooms.
All right, I think everybody's going to be joining us here momentarily. Welcome back to the big room. I hope that you were able to articulate your why as to why you teach, why it is that you do what you do. And I would love if somebody was interested in sharing their why with the group. I love hearing people's rationale for why they do what they do. So I invite whoever would like to share with the larger group as we begin our transition to our next conversation.
Okay, I'm Cynthia. Hi. Hi, Victoria. Kim and I spoke, and it turned out that our whys are very similar. She being from Vietnam, she loves to help her Vietnamese community. And, you know, there's not much more to it. She likes to see them succeed. And she puts a lot of effort into helping and teaching English in that environment. My why, I believe in success. I believe if I can teach one student who succeeds, that student in turn help another student, another person succeeds. And I wish something like teaching, each one teach one would expand into not only your household, but your community. And I wish the world could be, in the same, on the same level. So success, seeing somebody succeed is the ultimate.
That is
That's what we talked about.
That is so powerful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to share? Go ahead, Jody. Oh, we can't hear you yet.
Try that again. So I have felt for many years that although the US paid a lot of lip service to helping immigrants, we really don't do that much. And we do some things that really make it very difficult for immigrants coming to this country. So after volunteering, I decided that one of the things that I could do would be to teach ESL. And I also volunteer in a school that's predominantly Latino. So I feel like I help in small ways. There's still so much more to do, but that's why.
That's beautiful. Thank you. You know, there's a Swahili word, ujima, collective work and responsibility, that I am hearing in these responses that you all have shared. And that is such a beautiful foundation, right, upon which to build your skills and to increase your capacity and increase your competency, right? If the foundation is there and the will is there, we can do a lot of things together. Thank you. So keep your why in mind, right, as we continue through this workshop today, and keep it fresh, right at top of mind, because it's going to help us with this conversation that we're going to have, that we are having actually. So there are some culturally responsive teaching competencies that the that New America came up with. They did some research in all 50 states, and they came up with these as 8 teaching competencies that you would find in most teachers who are using culturally responsive pedagogy. And they are pretty straightforward in that, we're reflecting on our own cultural lens, something that we did kind of introduce last time we were together, for those of you who are with us, that reflecting on our own cultural lens, recognizing and redressing, right, bias in the system, and so forth and so on. So you can see those right there for you. What we are going to do is we're going to divide and conquer this list of competencies. And so what I'm going to invite us to do again is to get into some breakout rooms. We are going to do a jigsaw, divide and conquer, however you wish to say it, where we're going to have 8 groups. So we've got 25 folks here. So that would mean there'd be 3 or 4 to each group, but we want a total of 8 groups. And group 1 is going to take on competency 1. Group 2 is going to take on competency 2, and so on. And what I want you to do is to make sure, number 1, that you have introduced yourselves to each other. And you may take some time to read the competency. It's going to be pasted, this link, there's going to be a link pasted into the chat that will allow you to grab this report, this reflection tool. And so you'll be able to, starting on page 5, where the competencies actually are listed on any given page. Once you've introduced yourselves, take a moment and read through your assigned competency, and then have a conversation and make notes. So identify somebody who's going to be your reporter or recorder. It may be the same person, it may be 2 different people, but you all decide that. And tell us, be ready to share some themes about your particular competency. What stands out? Is it relevant? And if so, how? And how does it show up in your teaching presently, right? So we want to really explore these as much as we can in the time that we have together. So you're going to have 20 minutes in your breakout room, I think is it's what's on the screen here. So we've got the link in the chat already. Yes, we do. So make sure that you've clicked on that link, because my understanding is that chats don't follow us into breakout rooms anymore. So you'll want to grab that link now and open that up. And if there are any questions, now's a good time to ask them. Elizabeth?
How do you grab that link? What do you mean, grab that link?
You should be able to click on it. Is it not you?
I clicked on it, it came up to the middle of my screen.
Okay. It should open up in like your browser, whatever
Okay.
your browser is.
It's on the chat. They put it in the chat. If you check on the chat, it should be able to open it.
Okay.
Maybe you would double click or control click.
Well, maybe I'll depend on other people doing their part.
Or copy and paste. You can copy and paste it.
An idea.
Well, I have the chat here. Yeah, okay. I don't want to waste people's time. Let's just go on.
So if someone in your group isn't able to pull it up, if someone knows how to share screen from within the group, you could share screen so that everyone could see.
Okay.
And then we are going to also, again, just remind you what stands out about that competency. How is it relevant, and how does it show up in your teaching practice is kind of the themes that we're looking to be able to share out. Okay. And we will broadcast those, because we can't, once we put them in the chat, they disappear when you go into your breakout rooms. Okay.
I hit the chat and it opens up and it says meeting chat, larger group, or and then at the bottom it says everyone. Do I click on that? I don't understand this.
Let's see here. Let's put it in there one more time.
It has
Do you see the link?
it has a link which, okay, something else is happening.
All you want to do is click on the link.
Yes, I see the link.
The link to the
Okay.
competencies?
Yes,
Oh.
the reflection
Oh,
gun,
yeah, just the competencies, not the other link.
the culturally responsive teaching.
Uh-oh,
reflection
I don't
gun.
know what happened just now.
Hopefully someone in your group will have it and will
Uh-oh,
be able to
something
share
has
the
gone
screen.
wrong.
Oh no. Well, you hang out with us, Cynthia, before you join, and we will try to help you pull it up. But everybody else, let's get into our rooms, and then we will.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I am opening up the breakout rooms. Please pay attention to the room number when you receive your pop-up on your screen, because that's going to correspond with the competency that you have. So please just take note. So if you're in room 1, you would focus on competency 1 on the document. Opening the rooms, please join.
Were you able to work it out, Elizabeth? Well, Joy, if there was a prize for coming back first, you would get it. Yes. Well, welcome back. 20 minutes is not a long time. But it's a little bit of enough time, hopefully, for you to get into it. And then we call you back and then we can get to it in the main group. So Tiffany, if you would paste those prompts into the chat so that I don't have to share my screen, just so that we can have that reminder of what it is that we're reporting out about. We are going to start at the top, and that would mean group 1 and competency 1 reflect on one's own cultural lens. So what can you all tell us about it? That was
So we were able to discuss 3 of the reflection questions. Question 1 is, when did you become aware of your cultural heritage and all of that? So we're a pretty diverse group. I grew up in a small white community and came to DC, which is very multicultural, where I'm still a majority, but there's a lot more minority type folks than the very small southern town that I grew up in. Another one of us grew up in a small Black community, and so she was the majority and came to DC and became a minority as well. One grew up here, so she was used to the multicultural and went to Mexico where everybody was the same, and so had that same transition to think about. And so what we decided is that we all have to figure out that we need to come from a place of cultural humility and get other people's ideas and get their understandings before we try to make any thoughts, ideas, decisions about their learning. Question 3, I've forgotten now what question 3 was. Do you have question 3?
Have I ever used or been the victim of stereotypes and microaggressions? Is that the one?
That's question 4. I can answer that one. So many of us have been either stereotyped or have microaggressions from the fact that a couple of us are older, and so we get that stereotype and some microaggressions. And one of us, people think that she's Latina and she's not, and so then she gets the microaggressions from both the Latina side and the Black side. So she's dealing with microaggressions from both. And again, it's important to know our own biases. So everybody's coming in with a bias of some kind. And so figuring out how we can recognize our own bias is important.
Absolutely.
The other question I thought was 3. We have one of us has French and Spanish learners, and she doesn't speak either language. And so she's making sure that she's addressing all the different types of learners, adult learning, showing pictures, using real life scenarios, and making sure that it's just a safe place for everyone to learn.
Wonderful.
And those were the only 3 we got to.
That's all right. We are looking for your theme, so it's okay if you didn't get to all of them. All right, competency 2, room 2. Anna, Norma, Kim, and Tyra.
I guess I can, just looking at my notes. I think, I don't remember what I think the first question was, do we understand the difference between personal, institutional, systemic bias? Is that right? And we talked a little bit about how institutional bias can show up, and actually, I don't think we really have themes, so I'm just gonna just tell you a little bit about what we said. About, and I thought Tyra was very eloquent, and I don't know if Tyra, if you would just say what you said about the institutional bias, if you're
Okay.
well. Good.
So we talked about personal institutional bias, and I think we spent a good deal of time thinking about how the programs that we're all a part of are part of redressing larger systemic bias, and talking about larger ideas about the place of English in the United States. And Anna mentioned redlining and how the communities that we serve are separated from certain resources, separated from other communities. And generally just speaking about this idea that all of the programs that we are a part of in teaching English are focusing on giving students access to those resources that these larger structural biases may have limited them from having, and giving them access to the language that might allow them to, do other things in the United States. Because even though English isn't the official language of the United States, we make it so much a part of everything that it becomes pretty difficult to do things without knowing a little bit of English. And so that's one of the ways that we see the bias play out in our classrooms, because it structures the classrooms that we have.
Absolutely. When it comes to the redressing bias in the system, the recognition of it, we sometimes it's really, it can be obvious, and it also can be less than obvious that it's as a systemic issue. For example, we have, well, in a previous setting, there was a procedure which charged some students money to stay on campus. Those students who were being charged were Black and brown. The students who were not being charged were white. We got to spend the extra days on campus without any kind of additional charges. And that was just a process that had been instituted by the individual programs that they were part of. But when you looked at the system and you're looking at the inequality and the inequity disparities, you begin to see that it's a systemic issue, right? And that it must be addressed from the system, and that the individual biases and things of that nature enable the system to do what it does. It's a tough one. This one is one of the harder ones, because you have to not only recognize it, but you have to do something about it, right? We can't just say, oh, I saw that, now I don't do anything about it. All right, good job. How about group 3 and competency 3? Let's see.
That was me and Rosa Viene. We had a really interesting conversation about how do we incorporate all this cultural knowledge that students are bringing in, and how do we make sure that people feel reflected and they feel seen culturally. And we had like very similar contexts that sort of constrain what we can actually do in the classroom with respect to this. I mean, one of the constraints being the makeup of our classes, for example. Like, I'm in a situation where I work at Casa, and like 90, I would say like a very high percentage of my students are Latino and they're Spanish speakers. And Rosa is in a situation where she works at a community center that serves Ethiopian and Eritrean communities. And so it's the opposite, right? They have like a 98% Ethiopian student body, and there's like some Latinos and some West African speakers, right? Whereas, for us, it's the opposite. So it's difficult. We talked about using ventures, for example, as one of the textbooks. And I said, well, like there's some reflection of at least like different races and different origins in the textbook, but it's not completely central to every single lesson, right? But it's in a way, it's a good step towards kind of getting there and having people feel reflected and feel seen. We sort of agreed that in within the constraints that we have, like the best thing that we can do and that we do try to incorporate is like it's incidental, right? Where if we're looking at the numbers, for example, we can do a quick poll of the class to find out, where people are coming from, and how long have they been in the US, what size of family is, right? And sort of kind of like find out a little bit about them through those channels, and then kind of do a statistics, kind of like, finding out, how long how many people have been here in the US for 4 years or less, right? And then people start counting, and that was one way of sort of incorporating that into the activity. So for me and for Rosa, I think like it happens more incidentally. And the constraints that we were talking about was mostly along the lines of like, how much time do we have to prepare for this, right? And both she and I, we teach infrequently, right? So I teach on a Saturday schedule. So I have 8 meetings with my students over the course of 8 Saturdays. And she has something similar, but I think she has like 12 sessions instead. So there's only so much prep. And then again, also, I have the luxury in a way that a lot of like the stuff in the curricula that I use is already kind of prescribed for me. I already have a lot of that. So I was telling her, like, in that sense, because CASA is a Latino organization, from starters, a lot of the materials do reflect the preoccupation of our community and, the things that we have to deal with. So in that sense, that's sort of taken care of for me up to a point. And I try to kind of bring a little bit more with the ancillaries that I bring on myself, right, to think about that. The other constraint is like if you have a basic level, sometimes some of these things are difficult to sort of talk about. So all in all, we found that strategies that work well is like make it incidental and make it, a part of like what we're discussing and teaching. And the other thing is also like leave the floor open so that students, if they feel that they want to voice and share something, they can do so. So that was our 2 cents in the discussion. Thanks.
Awesome. I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that the right one? Yeah, to be able to bring in and complement what is already provided for with regard to the curriculum, and being able to expand that with what it is that is relevant to the learners. And I love the phrase in the reflection guide that talks about mirrors and windows for students, so that they can not only see themselves reflected back, but they can see into other cultural experiences and perspectives. And I think that is what this is ultimately about, is broadening our learners' perspectives by bringing culture into the curriculum. Good job. All right, so we did not have a room 4, so we're moving on to room 5 and competency 5, which is model high expectations for all students.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Preston. I currently teach with CASA. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, model high expectation for all students. This is a very good point in education. Everybody is capable of the ability to do something. They might be slow, but do it. So our first question is, how do I communicate? I have high expectations of all background, even those who are. Well, in our group, we have the idea each student knows that we try to let everybody in the class know that he or she, their participation is very important in the class. Okay? And that the student participation in the classroom is important for the learning experience of all other students, and also for the success of the class. Each person, we encourage you to participate in your classroom. So we know that some students don't like to talk, they don't like to participate, but we have the policy to say no question or verbal answer is wrong in our classroom. So that's gonna encourage everybody to talk and participate in the classroom. That's how we try to model the high expectations of all students, making the students feel respected, and their question or answer is also valid. Once the student gave an answer to a question, we don't want you to think that your answer is wrong, because whatever the only wrong answer is the one that we don't hear. In the classroom, there's somebody in the classroom, your fellow classmate, who can polish that answer or who may not even have known that answer. So your answer in the classroom is very important. So that's how we did that high expectation of all students in the classroom. Our number 2 question asked about how do I help students develop high expectations for themselves. Okay. Each student is a better teacher for the next student. You have to help students to know that the teacher standing in the classroom, explaining the content of the subject matter, may look at as an authoritative figure. But you as a student sitting next to your classmate, if you have something to say or you have an answer to a problem, the first student can learn more from you even without no stress than they can learn from the instructor. Student is the best teacher for the next student. So if you can encourage you to talk, answer questions, your responses can help your fellow students. We also talk about question number 3, say how do I ensure students disengage from learning? Disengage students from learning. This one, we have talk about say, recognition of students' participation. If a student answers a question in class, we recognize them by having other students know, hey, that was a good answer, and then other students showing their sense of appreciation for that answer. So we do that by that simple reward system of recognition of student participation in the class. When they show a good answer or ask a good question, let other students see that will influence other people. We are living beings. Once you are rewarded, there's always an incentive to do more. So there's a reward of appreciation for what you did. There's always a desire to do even better. Okay. Number 4, what support and scaffold do I provide to ensure that all students are able to meet rigorous outcome goals? Each student in the team member, we always have this practice of making sure that my team, in the team, the success of the team depends on each person in the team. And we make sure that if one person in the team doesn't do well, it affects the entire team. So we encourage those who know more or who have better understanding of the subject matter, be a teacher for their fellow students. Because if I know that 2 persons in my team, and I don't share with my team will fail. If I know that my participation in team X, if I share my knowledge, my understanding of the subject matter with the other team, and we all understand the subject or the content, that makes the whole thing succeed. So we encourage team members to be there for their other team members. So you can encourage a team member, instruct the team member on the subject matter. We believe that students in the team can succeed if he or she have a support from the fellow students.
Okay.
Number 5, we're talking about what are my short-term, long-term goals for developing this competency.
Preston, I'm gonna ask you to hold off on the goals one, because that one can be really specific to the individual, whereas the rest of those reflection questions are really about the group. So thank you so much for that report out. You are right on point when we're talking about, ensuring that we enable learners to demonstrate that they know what they know by teaching others, and that builds their confidence, helps them to be internally focused for their motivation and not extrinsically looking for rewards and things of that nature. But by teaching and learning by doing and teaching, it's so crucial. And that is a really important part of bringing in that high expectation for our learners. And so being able to do that, to identify that in the past you've performed in this way, and now you've experienced or demonstrated some growth, and I want to empower you, embolden you, and enable you to continue that trajectory. Beautiful. Well done. All right. Competency 6, promote respect for student differences. That would be Cynthia, Jill, Rebecca, and Ruth.
Yeah, so promote respect for student differences. We didn't actually talk specifically about the reflection questions. I think we talked more about your questions that you're asking in the chat.
Perfect.
So what stands out about the competency you reviewed with your collaborators? What really stands out, I think, is that we all have this sense in us of what it means to be respectful to the students, to each other, to ourselves, to their learning, differences and similarities. It feels like it was just like built into all of us, and maybe even all of us as teachers have that kind of sense of what it means to be respectful. How, if at all, is the competency you reviewed relevant to your teaching practice? I mean, it's really fundamental. All of what we do with teaching is like all these confidence say, we try and make them successful, we try to make them confident, let them succeed in what their goals are outside of the class, and it's all fundamentally based on respect. So it's really relevant to how we teach. How does it or could it show up in your teaching practice? We had some interesting ideas about that. I think that one is that you, I think, just listen to what the student is saying and be aware of how that fits into their overall personality, and how you can support what they're saying, relative to what else they're learning in the class. How can you, noticing when there are experiences that students have that are shared experiences or that are different among the different students, and point out that things that are different aren't necessarily bad or foreign, they're just different, and we all have differences, but yet we all still have these things that are similar as well. Another idea was just have an awareness of how the students are reacting to each other's comments, or even just, personalities, nationalities, whatever. Try to be aware of students that may be acting in a way that is bullying to other students, just by way of what they're perceiving or judging about the other students, and intervening and also talking in a way that will get around that issue, or not necessarily raising it explicitly, but in ways that kind of build awareness. I think awareness was another big idea that we had with each other, with our understanding of the students' awareness of each other, to help minimize if there's any differences or potential bullying. And I guess another idea that one of us expressed was, if students do come to class with maybe self-confidence issues, or maybe underlying that is the anxiety, performance anxiety, or anxiety of fitting in, and how to be aware of that kind of feeling, and working to, I guess that kind of more gets to what Preston was saying about success, have them be successful to lessen some of that anxiety.
Absolutely. Great distillation for us all on this promoting respect, which I think is one of the, like you were saying, Jill, fundamental, right? And we're recognizing that how we view respect is culturally situated and is context driven based on our cultures. And so recognizing that what I might feel is respectful could be completely misinterpreted by another, right, who is from a different background or has a different set of experiences. And so just being aware that, and when our learners are fearful or feel as though they are being disrespected, there's no learning that's going to happen, right? So we have to create the conditions that enable for students to feel respected in the classroom. And as you were saying, figuring out how to intervene when we see disrespect or what may be taken as disrespect happening. Great. All right. So competency 7, collaborate with families in the local community. Bridget, Edwin, and Jody.
I don't think we finalized who was going to speak. Edwin was driving. Jody, I hope you're happy for me to comment.
Yeah. If you want to go for it, go for it.
Great, thank you. So we were all in agreement that we absolutely had to have a deep level of knowledge about local communities. We all work for community-based programs. A few things came up. We need to reflect the diversity of the community in the resources. That could be images, that could be content that relates back to one of the earlier competencies. We need to acknowledge the reality of students' lives. So having that understanding, who are the students coming to class? What else is going on in their lives? For example, Jody mentioned finding out what time students are getting up and modifying practice accordingly. For example, being aware of energy levels if you're teaching in the evening. What are the expectations around homework? Is that actually realistic? What works with this student group? Keeping the content relevant in terms of giving them the tools to function successfully in the community, making sure that what you're teaching is relevant and will get them where they need to be. And making sure that you offer classes at different times to maximize participation so that you're enabling students in the morning, in the evening, at weekends, so you can try and reach more broadly across the community. At the end, we also talked about the fact of need to be aware that the community is constantly changing. Edwin gave some examples of, he works in the administration at CASA, seeing new groups coming in from different countries, South America or different countries. So that need to be flexible. The community is not fixed, it's constantly changing. The needs are changing, the demographics, you're teaching younger, you're teaching older. So having that flexibility to respond and continue to be inclusive.
Wow, well done. It is not an easy thing to be intentional and collaborate and figure out what is going to be the best approach for ensuring that the learners are getting the support that they need and have the capacity that that's necessary in order to do the work that they must do in order to succeed in this classroom. Great job. All right, bringing us home, Barbara, Cindy, Grace, and Xiaoming.
Hi, this is Barbara. I think Cynthia was going to report out, but she just sent me a text saying that she's driving her kids to school or something. So Xiaoming, please help me summarize what we talked about. Could you read it again for us?
Communicate in linguistically and culturally responsive ways.
Responsibly. Okay. So I think as we went down into the text, we were looking at, it's not just what you're saying, but it's how you're saying it, and looking at, and we started talking a little bit about touching, eye contact, and so the physical part of different communication styles. And I was trying to make the point that if you can pull away and talk about, describe different behaviors, it allows them to acknowledge, yes, there are different communication styles. Some people stand closer together, some people look eye to eye. There are different, and if you can then, having identified it and being able to describe it, if you can then maybe even pull back farther and say, well, how do you feel when somebody touches you and you're not used to that? Or so having a conversation that's pretty open and pretty descriptive might help overcome some of the feelings, where you can kind of be, instead of being so abstract, being a little bit more concrete and saying, well, what did you see and how did you feel and what might you do differently? So Xiaoming, did I capture what we talked about?
Yeah, I think you covered it. Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to just add that we talked about teachers' bias because the reading that we did, there was certain teachers that approached their students' behavior in the class as rude or defiant because they came from a different teaching style than their students. And so sometimes if the teacher's coming in with their own bias, to recognize that they have a bias that's different from their students or culture that's different, it might make them, knowing is the first step. If you know that you have a different culture than your students, and knowing maybe your students need a different way of teaching style, that could be helpful in the classroom, just knowing that you as the teacher are maybe the first step in changing your cultural attitude of your students. And so I know like Xiaoming had mentioned that she is a teacher that happens to speak Chinese. So some of her Chinese students can relate to her because they have the same cultural background. So she might have, she might be able to say or do things differently in her classroom with her particular students because they come from the same kind of background, and she understands if they rearrange the words when they're speaking, because Chinese culture has a different way of speaking the words. So just knowing the culture of your students could help bridge that gap between you and students.
Wonderful. Wow. This is a beginning conversation, right? We are just, barely touching the surface. So what I'm going to invite you all to do is I created a 8 competencies self-reflection kind of self-assessment that you can do. That I would encourage you to do, to take a look at each of these separately. You've heard a little bit about all of them, and take a look at them and evaluate yourself. Take a look and see where is there evidence that you are practicing this particular competency or developing this competency. Take note of that. If you don't have evidence, well, what might you do in order to incorporate or build this competency in your practice? Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take you identifying what it is that you're already doing, identifying where you have opportunities, and then figuring out how to close that gap and build on what you're already doing. Because it sounds like there is quite a bit of culturally responsive teaching happening in MCAEL coalition classrooms. So being able to lift that up and do more, identify where your opportunities are, is going to be key. As I think about this, we have also created an action plan that you can use to build a practice, right? To build your practice, because you can't do everything at once. So you may go through the self-assessment and be like, well, I need 4 out of 8 of these I don't have any evidence for. Well, you don't want to try to do 4 things at once. Pick one area that you want to focus on. And with that, be really specific in what it is that you intend or wish to have happen. And then figure out how you can get to there. By what kind of resources do you need? What kind of books do you need to read? What kind of experimentation do you need to do in the classroom, so that you can actually begin to practice these different approaches, because that's what they are. It's an experiment, and we're we're tackling different approaches. And then finally, we are not going to get a chance to talk about the equitable classroom practices, but there are some equitable classroom practices that will allow you, some things that you just can do to become more equitable in your approach to instruction. And so some of those things are on the screen here, but there is a checklist that you can also go down and be like, yeah, I do that. I welcome my learners by name. I use eye contact with all of my students in appropriate ways. I seek multiple perspectives. I don't just listen to one person. So there are some things that you can implement immediately, right, to really begin to experiment with culturally responsive teaching. That was a lot of words that I said in a few moments. And as I was talking, Tiffany was placing in the chat all the materials I think that I was referencing probably. So go ahead and grab those links so that you have them. Know that this is just the beginning. This is not the end, and it's a journey that you have to be willing to take in order to get to where you want to go. So you will have the PowerPoint. You will have all of those resources and tools that you can go through at your leisure. Hopefully this has been a good introduction to the competencies that you can begin to delve into deeper. And with that, I would ask if there are any questions for me before I turn it back over to Tiffany.
I think we're going to need a follow-up session, Victoria. I mean, maybe it's a good idea for us to try and like work through some of these things. And thank you for providing all of this material. It's incredible. But maybe like a self-assessment follow-up might not be a bad idea. Just to see if that we're really how we're thinking about these things, how we've applied some of these things. Like you said, this is just scratching the surface, but maybe after we've gotten into it a little bit more. I would love that personally.
All right. Well, Tiffany's on this call. She can figure out how to make it happen.
Noted, and I love that idea. So Jill, I'll be reaching out to you and we can discuss your ideas further. Okay. Well, everyone, could you join me in a virtual round of applause or whatever, a Zoom applause for Victoria. Victoria, thank you so much for today's session and for February's session. It feels like such good information. I appreciate the thirst that Jill shows, and I'm sure she represents many of us with the desire to dig deep into this, to learn more, to put it into practice. So we'll definitely start thinking about ways that we can continue this work as a coalition, in groups, in partners, however we want to move forward with that, because we definitely don't want to just stop here. Also in the chat, I have dropped a link to a 3-minute survey. If you could please take the time to complete that. Your feedback really helps us shape our sessions. Your feedback from last session helped shape this one. So this one will continue to help us shape workshops for you in the future. Also, I wanted to share with you an upcoming workshop that we have next, and I'll actually send it. For some reason, it's not copying and pasting, so I'll send it to you along with all the links that Victoria shared today and a follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. So you'll receive a copy of today's presentation, all of the links that have been shared, and then some upcoming events that you can register for through MCAEL. Our next one is on March 15th, next Wednesday from 1 to 2. And it's a network meeting on what our data tells us about adult ESOL in Montgomery County. So we've collected a lot of data that we've been analyzing, and we want to share with you an overview about the learners throughout Montgomery County programs and how we're meeting the current ESOL need in our community. Also an invitation to go to MCAEL.org. We've revamped our website, so we're kind of a little fancy now. So please go to MCAEL.org and check out some of the changes that we have made. And then also an invitation to save the date for May 3rd. Let's see if I can get this in the chat. And my link didn't work, so I'll send that to you in the follow-up as well. The MCAEL Spelling Bee is back. So on May 3rd from 6:30 to 8:30. It's a really fun event if you've never been. It's also an annual fundraiser for MCAEL. So save the date. Information is forthcoming. We hope to see you all there. So thank you again to Victoria. Thank you all for being so engaged and really caring about this topic. I invite you to unmute and say bye, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye and happy Women's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day for Women's Day. Bye-bye.